like that's not what I had in my head, but this is better than what I had in my head. And I think that, I mean, that's awesome because, I think whatever that outcome is going to be better than what you thought could think of anyways. Yeah, I mean, when I was, very young, I drew all the time. I think, I would make drawings for the other kids. We'd make storybooks and then started doing like anime and manga stuff. But to me, process is where the art takes place. The choices that you make
Mm.
um, is the art. I think, the painting or whatever is kind of a final product of it. Paint it abstractly uh, with the paint. So like I'm kind of putting myself in there. So I'm trying to always like skip between the line of realism abstraction and being like, okay, like there's some realist stuff here, but there's also some abstract stuff here.
Hi there, I'm April Paige, breaking down the what, when, where, and how creatives get their inspiration. I'm a big fan of the cursey words, and I've been a creative for 30 plus years in marketing and fine art. This is where creatives unite to break down the facts of creative life. Buckle up, let's get lost in the world of creativity together. Welcome, everyone, to Artist Antics with April, where we talk to creatives about creativity. And today I'm very excited to sit down to talk to oil painter and photographer Nick Dahlstrom, born in Pittsburgh, PA, now resides in Durham, North Carolina. He studied art at the Albion College in Albion, Michigan, and in Florence, Italy, as well as the surrounding Tuscany area through the SACI program. Nick takes both digital and film photographs and then translates them into drawings and oil paintings. The aim of his work is to examine the dichotomy of reality and perception. He always starts with the photograph using both digital and film. His unique vision lends itself to an abstract photography style. He uses the photograph as his source material for his oil paintings. So welcome, Nick. I'm so honored to have you here. I know we met at the Smash event, and
Hmm.
I'm just tickled pink that you wanted to sit down today. So thank you.
Of course. Yeah. That was an amazing event. I hope you have met
Yes,
a lot of people there
I
to
did.
connect
I
with.
got a lot. I'm still working through, connecting with them. So yeah, that was amazing. I really enjoyed that. I'll definitely be doing that again. That was my first one, but how did you get started in creating art? Like, I'd love to hear the story about what inspired you. I know when I was a child, I had artists and creatives around me, and that kind of sparked me into going into that direction. But I'm just curious, like, what happened? Like, what made you say, "Oh, art is a thing I want to do"?
Yeah. I mean, I think I get that question a lot. It's like, oh, when did you start making art? And I'm like, well, like I've always made art and just kind of kept building and building and building. And eventually I kind of realized, I think it was, when you're in high school, about to go to college, you ask yourself, like, okay, what am I gonna do? And I
Right.
know I took just like a bunch of art classes because, um, yeah, I thought it was fun. I didn't like study hall because I just thought it was boring and I didn't really care about doing my homework for other subjects. So I just kept taking more and more art classes at my high school. And so I was like, well, I definitely want to do art and um, a
So,
wiggly path, but we're here now and I'm keep
yeah.
doing it. So it's kind of stuck around. So um
So when you were younger, was it a thing? Because I know when I was younger, like, I would close myself in the room and not talk to anyone and just
mhm.
do my art and be creative, and, my family forced me to go out and be social, but they were worried about me. They're like, "This isn't normal." And so and now I'm like, how glorious it is when you have a whole day where you can, do your art. Because normally now, as adults, we don't get to do that very
I'm
often,
gonna
but
say, yeah, I
I'm
haven't
just
had a whole day to do my
yeah.
art in a long
I
time.
know, right? So, me neither. So, were you creative as a child? Like, did anybody influence you, or you just were sick, that you wanted to do something other than study hall, and then you found this thing that you loved?
Yeah, I mean, when I was, very young, I drew all the time. I think, I would make drawings for the other kids. We'd make storybooks and then started doing like anime and manga stuff. But
Hmm.
and then in high school, it was just my favorite. It was definitely my favorite class in high school. I was close with the teacher. She would let me come in late to school as long as I brought like McDonald's or something for the class. And she always marked me on time, and we'd, have coffee. Like she'd have a coffee pot and like let the kid, or I guess the kids, but like me at the time, let us all like just chill and like kind of have a nice morning routine where we're just making and talking
Wow.
and, drinking coffee. And I
Yeah.
brought some snacks occasionally because I was a piece of poop and always came late. I was
We
definitely
like
that
the cursey words here, so you can use them. But that's interesting. What a great teacher to allow you to like just chill and decompress. That's definitely not what's happening in the schools. And they don't teach kids to how to self-soothe or regulate, and it's go 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 go. So that's really cool. I appreciate that. I love the detail in your work. So
Mhm.
you take like everyday things and really go in and make them artistic, and I just love that. The turkey carcass and the oil filters and the cheeseburger are some of my favorites.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to ask, like, when you get inspired, do you see something that's around you daily and then it clicks and you say, "Oh, that would be a good art piece," or like how does it start? And then after we talk about that, I want to find out, what is your process from that inspiration to like final piece? Like I'd love to hear that. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think something that when I start like in college started taking myself more seriously and trying to like hone the craft a little bit more than just like, oh, this is something I like doing. Um, I learned and it kind of clicked into place that when you're drawing and trying to like realistically render something, it's way easier if you kind of take the subjectivity out of it and just make it more like object like. So you're all right, it's this shape with this line and this texture, and you're
For
almost
sure.
kind of abstracting stuff in your mind.
Yeah.
And I started looking at the world that way. So I was like, instead of like, oh, like that's a pot, starting to see it more just as shapes and lines and kind of taking the subject out of it. And I think that's something I'm then trying to like share that insight with the world. It's like, okay, like if I can use the camera that way and kind of capture things so it doesn't really become about the object anymore, it's more about how it looks and how it feels. You kind of strip away this um, subjective filter that I think a lot of
Yes.
people put on things. So
That's
to
awesome.
me, that was very inspiring. So I'm trying to like, you
Well,
know,
you're doing a good job because that's what came across to me,
hmm
was you taking these ordinary things and making them art is,
hmm
a gift in my mind, because it's so, you can still tell what they are, but you are definitely, you know, have your own interpretation of that, is what you're saying. And it brings it, some life that, these ordinary objects wouldn't normally bring to you in real life. So I just think it's awesome, and that's definitely coming across for sure. So kudos to you, because I'm
Thank
working
you.
on a I'm working on a new process on how to get more energy onto my painting, like more life.
hmm
And yeah, I'm still in that process. But I'd love to hear from you, like your process. Like what do you do from start to finish? For our audience, we've talked to everybody from filmmakers to photographers to fine artists to even comedians, and art therapists. So I just love to hear everyone's process of, where when that inspiration hits, what do you do from
hmm
there? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to me, process is where the art takes place. The choices that you make
Mm.
um, is the art. I think, the painting or whatever is kind of a final product of it. So I think it's the choices that we make. And so for a long time, my process was to take a photograph and then paint it in kind of the simplest of terms. But I think harkening back to what I just said, I use the camera because, the camera and the eye see a little bit different, so I could kind of play with the lighting and the angles and stuff with the camera and really capture something that the human eye wouldn't normally see to, do that thing like abstract it, get a new perspective, kind of freshen up and make it something more. And then I liked painting it because it was almost like, all right, I'm processing it, and then like, how does my brain kind of put the filter on it? Um, how do I get to know? And by painting it, it then kind of like really removes itself, and um, the original subject matter doesn't really matter anymore. Now it's this whole new image that
Yeah.
it's almost like a Rorschach test that you can kind of
Yeah. No, for sure.
um,
Yeah.
I'm starting or trying to figure out a new process, and that's, as like you're saying, it's harder said than done for sure. Um, because before I would take the photo, like take an abstract photograph and then try to like realistically paint it, obviously maybe take a little bit of um what's it called? Like liberties
Creative
with it.
license.
Yeah,
Yeah.
creative license with it. But for the most part, I took a photo and I painted it. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, all right, like I think I've done that. And I like skating the edge of like realism
Mm.
and abstraction. So now I'm trying to like kind of reverse that a little bit. And I'm doing more film photography and kind of going out into the real world because I would take the photo like in a studio setting. So like in a dark room with like, strong Baroque lighting. So like
Right.
everything's kind of crazy. But now I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go out with a film camera and like kind of take a little bit more candid photos, still a little bit of my style, and then paint it abstractly uh, with the paint. So like I'm kind of putting myself in there. So I'm trying to always like skip between the line of realism abstraction and being like, okay, like there's some realist stuff here, but there's also some abstract stuff here.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a
so
kind of the line I've been trying to ride. I call it the
Mhm.
razor's edge because
Mhm.
for me, and mine's a little different in the focus, but mine is, you have to have the technique, right? And then you also have to be able to let yourself go in order
Mhm.
to get that energy onto the painting, right? To
Yeah.
have those magic things happen. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to make it representational, but so people understand, what the subject is, I guess. But at the same time, making it a little more lively and, right now my style is too flat, so that's what's causing me to grow. And you're right, you ride that edge, and I think that's where in my mind, when you hit that edge, right, that's where the magic happens, but
Yeah.
that's the thing, you fall off a lot either way, so,
Yeah.
it's hard to stay on there, and when you do, you're like, "Oh god, I can't gotta I gotta keep painting, screw all the other things I was gonna do today, I'm in the zone, like, I have to stay," so I've had those moments too where I'm just like, "Well, I guess I'm doing this today." You know?
Yeah.
And then other days I sit down and I have 5 hours and I'm like, nothing's happening.
Yeah. I know when you have all the time in the world, I feel like
Yeah.
that's
So
those are the least productive times, but
yeah, isn't that funny? So what happens, like, when you are what happens for you when you have blocks? What do you do? Because 'Cause I'd love to hear that.
yeah, I like to have multiple paintings going on, and then I also like have this photography thing. So I kind of, instead of like, all right, having like one thing that needs to get done and pushing that ball, try to like, okay, like this ball's not going forward. I can kind of uh, go to this again. And I think my original process was always nice because I had the photo, so I knew what to paint, and I would just paint it, and it would be kind of easy. So I'd have a few of those going. So like the beginning of paintings are always very like energetic, and then kind of as you get to the end, you're like, all right, just small details, small things here and
Yeah.
there. So, if I was feeling kind of lively, I would, start a new painting or do the big energy stuff. But if I was just having kind of a slower, more somber day where I just kind of want to sit and like listen to my book or my podcast or whatever. I could sit in the chair and just kind of, do the small details. So,
Yeah.
um, I think
You know,
that's been an all right system to not
yeah.
find a
No,
block. It's just, you know,
yeah, that's great. I have, when I'm painting regularly, I have at least 5 going at the same time because with oils, I have to wait for them to dry. So by the time
mhm.
I get to the first one again, like I'm ready to go usually.
Yeah,
So it's helpful for me to have that rolling thing going on. So I have more to go to if I'm getting stuck or it's not dry or whatever. But, something I do, which to your point about these things being objects, sometimes when I get so caught up, like it's just, I can't do anything to fix it. And it's been weeks and I
yeah,
can't figure it out. And I've tried a bunch of stuff and it's not working for me. I turn them upside down to look like an object instead of
hmm,
what I'm trying to paint, because for
mm,
whatever reason, to your point, the programming in my mind is conflicting with what I'm trying to put on this painting, and I'm like, "Okay, I can't think of it as a dancer, I can't think of it as a bird or whatever it
mhm,
is," right? I need to think of it as an object, so flip them upside down, and sometimes when I do that, the answer comes, and I put them in my living room too to like sit there and stare at me, while I'm watching TV or doing things there. And sometimes it'll come, and I'll be like, oh my god, I don't know why I didn't see that before, so that helps for our audience. And what
yeah.
you do too, that's awesome. What
No,
media?
that's a really good idea because as I'm finding being an abstract painter is way harder because I'm like, all right, before I would just paint the thing. And I was like,
Yep.
there's a goal, and now it's like, all right, like what should I do now? Like I can like kind of still paint, but how and why do I veer and like,
Mm,
loose mark making versus, you know, scraping the painting
yeah.
or, being tight here and loose like I'm just like, oh man, there's like when there's more choices, it's so much harder to like figure out like, all right, what do I want to do? Um,
Yeah, and my mentor, he's like, "April, you have to get out of your own way, like, put yourself aside
yeah.
and let it come through," and I'm like, "I don't know how to." Like, I'm still judging, to make the
Yeah.
decision of what I'm gonna use to do it, so it's hard for me to get that free. I think, I understand what he's trying to say, just, I don't know if I'm there yet, but I think, you know, what you're saying is true. Like anybody can be a copier of objects, right? But you're putting your artistic on it and your interpretation. And that's where the art is. I mean,
Hmm.
to me, and I'm just coming to this kind of epiphany, is that the mark making of us being humans and just doing it and putting it on there, perfect or not, is what makes it art. So,
Yeah.
it's not, and for all those realists out there, please don't please don't drag me. I love realism in painting, but I personally prefer when it looks painterly and when you can see the strokes and the texture and, it's something other than what you're seeing or what in your mind or your programming, to your point. So, I think that whatever decision you make is gonna be a good one, and um I'm trying to resolve myself to that because
Yeah.
you know, the perfection judging thing in your mind is always there, like, and now I appreciate being a human painter and putting something on this canvas is the act of doing that is the art,
Mhm.
so I really feel like any choice you make, it really is up to you, but that whatever direction you go in, it's still going to be an art piece. So that's a new kind of epiphany to me that it helps me not be so restrictive with my choices and my judgment. Frees me up to say, if I feel like putting white on there now, okay, let's do that. And they don't all work out.
Hmm.
But you tried it, you did it, and sometimes that's where the magic in those happy accidents happen. So for me anyway. Uh yeah.
I think too when, so I kind of, only do a color at a time and like layer and then kind of come back to it after it dries. I'm definitely not an alla prima painter, but yes, I make a decision and I kind of stick to it and, pull it out and I try to save judgment for when I'm done or for the next day to, come at it with fresh eyes. And if I don't like it or if I'm just like, oh, like that wasn't I was doing, I kind of messed up or whatever my definition of it is. I think at least there's still like, okay, well, salvaging it could like make it even better than if I had like made the right choice. I'm putting right and wrong in air quotes because it is
Right.
all subjective, but I think, sometimes the happy accident is just fixing a mistake or trying to bring it back or, do whatever. I think sometimes you're like, oh, okay, like that turned out way better and I've learned, and I think I learned this lesson through the first step of my process was like the more I tried to control the look and the feel of whatever I was working on, like the worse and worse it got. I think kind of
Yeah.
open and like looking at it and seeing what does this need or what could it be, um, and just letting it happen instead of trying to make it happen was always
That's
way
it.
more fruitful.
Yeah, and that anxiety I think comes through on the
Mhm.
piece,
Like,
I
oh, it doesn't look right. But if you kind of let it just keep looking wrong or however it
yeah.
wants to look, you're like, okay, that's not what I would have like, that's not what I had in my head, but this is better than what I had in my head. And I think I mean, that's awesome because, I think whatever that outcome is gonna be better than what you thought could think of anyways. So,
Yeah, and I paint with artists too. A couple times a year I ask artists if they want to paint side by side. We paint the same subject and just for a couple of hours share our techniques, share how we do it, share the nitty gritty, which we
hmm.
don't really get into here, but we're kind of overarching. But um, they have to be something I like, and it has to be, you know, um, somebody who's open, because some people aren't open to sharing. But
Yeah.
in all of those that I've done, I've really learned a lot, and vice versa. It was that mutual sharing that was so good, and I wish more people would do that. But so in Tuscany, like, what did you
Mhm.
learn from that trip? And tell us about the SACI program as well. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it was a study abroad program. So I spent a semester living in Florence, like right behind the Duomo, which is like
Mm,
the huge cathedral in Florence. If you've been
yep,
there, you definitely
I
know
have.
it's like the landmark that everyone kind of orients themselves, at least in the historic district. I'm sure out in the modern part of the city, it's less. Uh,
Yeah, my girlfriend lives in Siena, and I would, she was an English professor at the university
mhm.
there, and I would take day trips to, Florence or Rome or wherever I wanted to go. And I just found it to be the art was just overwhelming for me. I'm sure you
Yeah.
felt the same. But the churches, to your point, were my favorite thing. I made her go into like every church with me, and she's like, "Why are we doing this?" And I was like, "They're beautiful." And each city has their own, so why wouldn't you? And the relics, that are in them and stuff like that. It was just really cool. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean it is very, very overwhelming. I think to that point, like that's when art history really came alive for me because
Mm,
before then I couldn't give a rat's ass about art history. I was just like, all right, cool, like whatever, like paintings,
yeah.
paintings, paintings, blah blah blah. I was like, I just like to make art. I don't care about.
who did it in the
all this stuff
past,
and who did
800
it and
years
like
ago. Yeah.
whatever. And then there I just went and it's like there is art literally like all around you, like outside of the
Mm,
museums, in the museums, like in the churches, in like everywhere you look, it's there.
it's true.
And I had a very, very like almost too knowledgeable of an art historian teacher. Like, oh, she would go over many hours if you'd let her keep talking of class every day. And we took field trips to places. Every weekend we'd go to a different town and like kind of do a quick tour, like just hours and hours. And I was like, holy shit. Um, but it's incredible because like during the Renaissance and the early Byzantine, which is the time period I studied, those like 300-ish years right before the High Renaissance. Um, that's just how they lived their lives. And it was
Mm,
always about these artists like, all right, like you did this, I need to like one up you with this. And it kind of kept going and going and going.
yeah.
And that's when it just clicked to me that I was like, oh, like the art that we're all studying, they're all like referencing each other and just trying to like one up or like do their own spin or
Yep.
say something new, and like technology develops. So people are commenting on this. And so, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how I found, like, eventually interpreting that, kind of how I found myself talking about the camera and the photograph through my paintings, because when the camera was invented, it really put painters out of a job, just, so to speak, because I think a big part of painting um, was portraiture
Yeah.
and going and like capturing faraway landscapes and then bringing
Yeah.
it back up. That's how people experience the world. But now we have the camera, now we have a cell phone, and we can all take photos and share. So like,
Yeah.
you know, it's almost like what's the point of painting now? And that's, you know, when Impressionism started to happen and people are like,
Yeah.
okay, well, like now we can express ourselves like internally,
Yes.
experiment with color and how we see and interact with the world and say
That's
some
right.
stuff with our painting. And so, um,
It
I
was
really like,
the it was the TV of the time, right? So they didn't have TV or radio or, they had plays and that kind of
yeah,
entertainment, but
nobody could read, like the common person
yeah.
couldn't read. So like, that's why churches were
Yep.
filled with so many of these pictures, because like that's how they got their stories.
Yep.
Um, and
Yeah, that's how they understood it, and, it was the talk of society, so, back then, and, it's sad that it's, only certain sectors of society, but, still
yeah,
think
and
that
then the
now.
dang printing press came out and the camera came out and
Yeah, and
um,
now we have, which we're gonna talk about, AI and all of those things,
mhm,
um, so when you take your digital photograph and
mhm.
you're gonna make an art piece from it, um, do you manipulate that? Like, I know I work with a lot of artists who use all kinds of programs that, like, put filters and different things on it, so when they have it the way they want it, then they have a reference piece to, like, start their piece from. I'm just curious, do you do any of that in between, the photograph and the painting? Yeah.
Not so much. I think I kind of leave the editing up to my brain, is kind of where like why I paint. I kind of, you know, do my embellishments that way. Um, but I do take like a bunch of photos. Like I'll take, you know, at least 100, if not like 400 or 500 photos where I'm just like manipulating the aperture and the lighting and the exposure just to kind of like spaghetti on the wall, kind of see what
Yeah.
I got, which is
Yeah.
why I am very grateful I'm like alive when I am, because I definitely learned how to photograph better with a digital camera, and it's way more inexpensive. If I did that
Yeah.
with a film camera, I would like, you know,
Although word on the street is film is coming back, for some from
Film is coming
artists. Yep.
back.
Mhm.
And like I said, I'm starting to get into film, which is why I'm grateful I kind of learned my language through the camera on digital, because I could fuck up a lot, and now it can be a little bit more precious. I've doing film and pinhole photography. I took a class
Interesting.
about that, and that's kind of fun. It's a little camera obscura-esque, but instead of a painter in a box, there's just like a photo paper. So no lens, just a hole in a box, and you just open it up for a couple seconds,
Yeah,
close it up, develop it.
interesting.
It is super fun.
Great.
But with editing, I am trying, I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but like I am trying to think about AI in my work as well. And I've dabbled in that. I'm trying to run a lot of my photographs through AI to like kind of see what I can do, how I can kind of break AI, if that makes any sense. Um,
Yes, I try to break it every day. Not
yeah.
with art though.
Um,
Um,
I think there's definitely something to be said. It's here to stay,
yeah,
unfortunately.
no, it's here to stay, and I'd love to dive into this because, just like we were talking before, there was the the computer that took, typewriters out. It was
Hmm.
the, television that took radio out, email to, we still have snail mail. We still have all the other things. We still have, all the things that replaced or were replaced by these
Hmm.
new technologies. So I don't think it's going to go away. I just don't know that we know what AI is going to be. It's in its infancy, and,
Hmm.
I'm using tools already to help me with my promotion of what I do. So,
Yeah.
and it saves me so much time. And then I customize it. I never use what it gives me as the final. But
Hmm.
there are some art tools out there that are AI driven. And I tried to get it to, mash 2 styles together and gave it a subject, and it didn't turn out great. I was like, no." And then
Yeah.
I gave it 2 specific artists after that I
Hmm.
like, and gave it a subject and said, "Use these 2 styles," and I don't think it understood what I was asking. It's not there yet, is what I'm trying to say, but I can perceive that it would be. But, in my other conversations, I say, even if we do that, even if I had an AI tool that said, "Okay, I want a style of, Picasso and the new modern, this modern person, that I follow, and mash them together to create a horse image or whatever." And I don't know if that's ever gonna actually, come to be like something that's, usable. But what it did come up with actually did spark an idea for me that I didn't think of. Even though I didn't like what it was, I was like, "Oh, I didn't think of that," you know?
Hmm.
So, it's just things you might not, as a human, think of when you're trying to, come up with maybe a new style that will help you, get there in the end. You still have to be human. So I think even with the AI art that I see in my feed that's being created right now, I don't think that, I think there might be a section of art buyers that will want that. As long as they say that it's AI,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that if that's what they want, but I don't think I think there's still gonna be a need and a want for human beings to paint, and have those paintings, because it's been my experience that they want the story behind the art, like who you are, what you're trying to say, why did you pick that subject? How did you get to your style, And I don't think that's ever gonna go away. I'd love to hear your comments about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's definitely a tool, and I think how we use it is how it's gonna mold the tool. So if we don't use it, it's gonna maybe that's when it kind of becomes like out of hand and a bad thing. But I think if
Mhm.
we start using it and embracing it, because it is here to stay, I don't think it's gonna go away. I think, you know, we need to mold it to be better and more useful. Um, But yeah, I mean, I have been using it to like I said, I'm trying to get that line between abstraction and realism, and I've been putting my photos into it and trying to manipulate them that way. And one way that I've been liking is I'll have one photo and then like a completely different photo and try to like make a movie, like a 4 second clip where it like transitions from one to the other,
Yeah.
and I'll like stop it at a certain point where I'm like, oh, like those are some weird organic-y but like, artificial shapes, and it's fun because it kind of plays on that. It's like, all right, cool. Like I would have never come up with that, but then, that's maybe a better basis to then kind of paint. And so it's still like is those things. They're mushed together a little bit, but it's not those things because now it's like super artificial and we're running it through like more and more filters
Yeah.
and processing. So, um,
But
I
if you
think,
love it, to your point, if you love it, if you love what that created, even though it's abstract, and then you
hmm
actually physically put it on the canvas, I think that would be super cool to try.
hmm
You know, I mean, it sounds like you're getting away from realism and you're gonna go towards abstract here very soon.
Yeah, I definitely am. I've always liked abstract art. I kind of, it took me a while to get there. Like I said, the art history, like, explosion in my head. I was like, oh, I get abstract art now. Like, because before I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, like, whatever. Like, realism
Yeah.
is like the coolest thing ever because
Yeah.
abstract art is these like stupid little conceptual things, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And then I was like, oh, I get it. I just have to like think about it as like if I was seeing it for the first time back in like the 1940s and not,
Right.
in 2015 or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there, done like whatever, like blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. So I think, yeah, I think abstract or AI is there, and I think, you're either gonna learn how to use it or talk about it, or, you know, either reject it or embrace it. But I think, for me, like those images where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. If I printed that out, I don't think that would like be a final work for me. If I'm
Peace.
like, all
Yeah.
right, I need to paint this and kind of like
Mhm.
do something else with it. At least for me, that feels better than just like, oh, okay, this little clip, that's it. Uh,
Yeah. No, it's
so,
reference. I think, I usually have several reference
hmm
images for whatever I'm doing before I start because you never know what one of those is going to do in the middle or the end or the beginning of a piece. So, yeah, no, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that you're embracing it because I do think it's here to stay. And I think if we use it well,
hmm
and we are policing ourselves as a whole, which, not everybody's going to do that, but if as long as we
yeah,
market AI, art, then I'm perfectly fine with that if that's what someone wants to purchase. But
yeah.
so what mediums do you use? Like, I know film, and then I'm just curious about like your type of paints. Like, how do you do that? Do you put on one layer and then let it dry and do another? Like, what's the process there?
Yeah, so I'm an oil painter.
Mhm.
I definitely am. I'm not an alla prima painter, so I'll paint a couple colors and then let it dry, kind of
Me
hit,
too. Yeah,
another kind of colors, but like all within like the same color scheme pretty much, nothing super crazy. I do like to layer. I think that lends itself a lot more because like you start to see peaks and valleys of different colors and it pops more than just like a smooth
that's right.
blend. But that's just me.
No, I agree. Like, I think the layers also bring depth.
hmm
Yeah, but go ahead.
I mean, I am trying to get into plein air painting whenever I have time, but um, because I don't know, for me, yeah. So I host a figure drawing thing as well, and I think figure drawing lets me kind of experiment, and I don't like care about how the drawing looks, which is amazing in my mind because I'm just like, oh, I'm just here to draw and kind of get out of my like my big projects, my
Right.
paintings, like the serious stuff. This is just, um, but it definitely kind of informs a lot in my paintings, subconsciously, because I'll let go and just kind of do like a continuous contour drawing, or like, see how far I can kind of take the gesture and
Yep.
do that and not really worry about making a pretty drawing that works or doesn't work. Um,
Yeah. No, do you do that every day? Like, how often do you do it?
I actually, kind of quick plug, host it every week at Golden Belt. It's
Okay.
open to the public. I invite people in.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
go. I'll put it in the description for anybody who's interested, but that's awesome. So you do it once a week?
once a week, every Thursday at Golden Belt, and then once a month, the first Monday of the month at the Fruit. And the group is called Go Figure Durham. So
Okay. And, I'll put the link to that so everybody can, get to it if they need to.
yeah.
Thank you for that. That's awesome that you're hosting it. So yeah, I know other artists who there's an artist that I follow. He's an illustrator for magazines, but
Mhm.
he takes an ordinary object and last year he took a iron, the shape of a clothes iron, and every day use that shape to create something from it, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
It could be a shoe or nose or, whatever,
Yeah.
something mechanical. I forget all the things he did, but, it was, phenomenal, but it trains your mind to, like, start thinking, um, a little outside of the box. I hate saying that, but it really does. You're challenging yourself and, in a good way to keep your mind agile. Because I think painting, part of it is about agility, you have
Mhm.
to be able to see what's going on and then go with wherever that's going
Yeah.
and know that that's happening, too. Like, you have to have the experience and the technique to say, "Oh, look at that," "Let's go there." So, doesn't happen very often, but I love it when it does, and my whole thing is my whole process, everything I'm doing is just to get to that moment, you know,
Yeah.
of the magic. So,
I
yeah.
think there's definitely like kind of pushing past your own vision.
Mm.
And that's kind of going back to uh my process, or part of the process where I take the digital photographs in the studio. Like, I have a vision, like, all right, I'm gonna take a picture of this watermelon, and here's like how I could see the paintings look, and I take those photos, and I'm like, all right, like, keep going. And like, I've run out of ideas, but I keep photographing, hoping like something new and more inspired kind of comes up, and I'm just trying anything and everything. And there's definitely like, oh, these photos are shit, and then they start to pick up again. I'm like, okay, cool, like I found something else that like I wasn't thinking of at all.
Right.
It's like it's pure and it's fresh and it's like awesome. And so I kind of keep going there, and I think that's when you find those moments, because I'm sure the first couple days he's like, all right, an iron, and he pulls out the easy stuff for the stuff that he has in mind, and then
Right.
probably a bunch of shit for a little bit, and then after a while he's like, all right, like, I don't know, man, I don't have anything. And he just starts
Yeah.
moving the pencil, and then he's like, oh, okay, and then he finds it again. And I can definitely relate to that. And
Yeah. He had to put it, the shape in, it was like in a wooden block form so he could
hmm
see it three-dimensionally. Because he did get to that point where to your what you're saying, he got to the point where he's like, "What the hell else am I gonna do with this thing? I gotta be able to see it in 3D now in order to,
yeah,
like, move it around." So he made a little mini version, and he started just playing with it on the table and throwing it up and letting it land wherever it wanted to. Okay, that's the angle and the shape I'm using today. And what is that? Like, he would
yeah.
draw it out. And anyway, I think it's a really cool exercise. I might try it. I don't know. We'll see. So, so as far as paints that you use, is there a specific brand that you like?
I've been transitioning slowly as I've been kind of running out of colors. I was using just Winsor Newton for rocks. It was cheap and accessible.
Hmm.
But I'm slowly transitioning my paints into the gram paints. and
Okay.
something. I know they use like walnut oil.
Mhm.
And the colors are pretty nice. I've been liking using like just the walnut oil itself as a medium. So I'll buy like a bottle of just the oil as well to kind of smooth some stuff out when I need to
That's cool.
um
That's
do
a
that.
good
So that's
tip.
kind of what I've gravitated towards in painting.
Yeah, I use Winsor Newton too, the quote unquote fast drying
Hmm.
oils, which aren't fast. They're 24 to 48 hours as opposed
Yeah,
to 5 days. But
it depends on what you use. I think every color is different.
yeah. And then another brand I really like is Gamblin. Have you ever heard of Gamblin? They're like
Hmm.
Northeast and it's just buttery. They're I
Yeah,
can't the best adjective I can come up with is that it's buttery. I love painting with their paints, but they're expensive. So,
yeah.
um, that's why I only have a few of them. But, um, how did your style I know you're working on maybe more abstract now,
Uh-huh.
and we grow as a person, and I fully believe that our style grows with us, and I think you're having that growth moment right now too.
Hmm. For sure.
So, um, like, how do you what do you do to like get to and I'll tell you what I'm doing and well, maybe we can share. But what do you do to try to help evolve that style? Is it just, practicing or trying new things or trying new paint or, trying new subjects? Like how are you trying to evolve that style and really come up with something you're gonna lock into now? How do you do that? Like, what are you doing in your process? Since we're both in the middle of it, I think it's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll start by with the end of the old process, or at least like the deciding to take the next step was I realized I was just kind of becoming a copy machine. I was like, all right, I take the photo, I paint the photo, and for a while that was, very fulfilling. I was always like, okay, like having fun, challenging myself, and then I realized I wasn't growing anymore. Like I wasn't challenged by my art, and
Mhm.
there's probably a bunch of famous artists, and they've all said different ways, but good art challenges you. So if you feel like you're in your comfort zone, that's when you need to take the next step when you don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
And um, and I stumbled into that stuff because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was honestly in college was um, just trying to copy the masters in a way, or
Yep.
like kind of take
That's
references
what
and
they
then
teach
like
you to do.
do
Yeah.
my own thing. So I like loved, Caravaggio's beef carcass. So I was like, all right, like how can I do my version of that? And I was like, on a college budget. I'm like, I'm gonna go to the store, buy some meat and like rack it up. And, I was like, I take forever to paint, so I can't have this chicken hanging in like a college studio for, 3 weeks. It's
That's
gonna
awesome, by the way.
smelled
Keep going.
terrible. So I was like, I'm gonna photograph it because I have to. Um,
Yeah.
that's disgusting. But I was like, all right, if I'm gonna photograph it, I need to like make it known that I'm photographing it. So not just like, not just stand back, take a photo. But I was like, I have to like get a weird photography angle and light and this. And so, there was a lot of like necessities, and I just kind of did it, and then I painted it, and it was a huge hit. And I was like, oh, I found something. I don't know what it is, and it took me many paintings to be like, all right, like here's that process. Here's how I can kind of capture lighting. Got that down, and now I'm like, all right, I just got bored.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this next step? And
That happened to me too with abstracts.
mm-hmm,
I was doing these swirls and I was getting known for these swirls and I was like, I can't do it anymore. Like after
mm-hmm,
like 30, 40, 50 swirls, I'm like, I can't do this. It doesn't feel
yeah,
right. It feels like I'm selling out, you know? Like it's just and people will buy them and my friends and family are like, you're crazy. Like you've got a gold mine here. And I was like, it's not about that. It's about,
yeah,
what I'm trying to convey as an artist. And, then they roll their eyes at me. roll on, and I'm like, they don't understand. Your voice is coming through. But go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, like, and that's it, and you kind of have to do what's scary and stupid, maybe. Because at the same time, I would sell some paintings here and there, but I wasn't a big shot or anything, so I'm like, who am I painting for? I need to paint for myself and challenge and grow. Um,
Hmm.
and so I kind of took the next step, and I was like, I know I want to be more abstract because I'm, you know, trying to like say like, oh, like these photographs are abstract because they're not real anymore. It's not the subject, it's a painting now. And I'm
Mm.
trying to grapple with that, but now I'm trying to do the opposite where I paint it in like a clearly abstract way, but it's still like, oh, that is that thing. And it's
Right.
kind of the reverse where
That's it.
I'm not painting in a realistic fashion anymore, but people can
Un-
recognize it.
yes, I think you're onto something. Keep going with that because
Yeah, and
that's
so that's
that's
the
interesting.
vision.
Yeah.
I just don't know where it is because I think, here's a painting of mine and
Yep.
it's painted in a realistic style, but you're like, oh, like what? You grapple with the imagery a little bit and you try to like, oh, it is something, but
What
what is it?
exactly? Yeah.
And kind of the flip side, it's like, oh, it's that thing, but it's painted in a really like cool, unique way that it's like it's not, it is an abstract painting. So
Yeah. What is
um
it?
this is a peony.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
like
Like a
there's like the center of it. I
okay.
dried the petals, so the petals got all like,
Dried
crispy,
up. Yeah.
gnarly and
Mhm.
stuff. And there's the stem in the background. So
Got it.
um
Cool.
yeah. It's crazy because like I always see immediately what it is because I photograph
Yeah.
it, I
Well,
see the
yeah.
photograph and then I paint it and I show people the photograph and they're like, oh, like that looks exactly like the photograph, but I'm like,
Yeah.
and I think
If you
that's
ever
fine.
display them, that's the way I would do it is with the photograph. That would be
Yeah.
cool.
So
Um Another question I ask everyone is what is your favorite creation story to date? Like it can be inspiring, funny, ambitious, meaningful, like at a show, you at a, moment when you're painting, with somebody that's buying, like
hmm
other artists. Like, do you have a funny or favorite, ambitious, meaningful story to share with us?
um man, I guess I don't know if it's funny or whatever, but a story that just kind of popped into my mind is like the
Mhm.
first piece of art that I sold in college was a sculpture, and like it was my first abstract, and I just kind of did it because I was like in a class for it. I completely abandoned the subject. Like the subject was supposed to be like skeleton and cover, and then I just like, but it was our welding project too, so you're learning a technique and you have a
Yeah.
prompt.
Yeah.
Um, and I just, started welding, building some stuff, and I was like, I have no idea where this is gonna go because I was a shitty student and like the teacher hated me,
Oh,
absolutely hated me. Um,
that's not
but it
okay.
was, I mean, a lot of the teachers hated me because I was a shitty student and I deserved to be not liked. But, and I just went in there and I was like probably a little higher, hungover or something. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna welding. And I started
Weld
doing it.
some
I was like,
stuff
all right.
together.
I
Yeah.
started building stuff and I was like, I'm gonna make it like off balance so it's gonna fall and kind of have a problem that I have to need to fix. And so then I like had to weld it so it came back into balance and I kind of kept doing that where I was like, all right, now it's back in balance and then do something else that would make it tip over and like, all right, how do I
Interesting.
bring it back? Um, and so the teacher was there and she's like, man, like this is really good. I love it. It's not the prompt at all. And like I don't think you should like try to cover it or do whatever with the prompt. I was like, I think you have what it is there. Um and I
Well,
did
that's
that and like
cool. That was a
yeah.
happy accident. Maybe you should go down that road.
Yeah, I am very good at happy accidents. My computer arts class, I kind of did something similar where um we're learning how to draw in Photoshop and do all this stuff. And again, I would come to like class like hungover, unfortunately, and they had a scanner and he like taught us how to like scan stuff. And he's like, "Oh, like if you like ramp up the It was a really good scanner. It's like, so if you ramp up the things, you can like see the pores in the wood. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's really cool. And so I was like, I just felt like shit and didn't want to stare at a computer screen. So I would scan things for like 40 minutes and just
Oh
stand
boy.
there. But I was like, all right, I need to have an excuse to stand by the scanner. So I'd start to like move move the stuff on the scanner. So I'd
Oh,
come out with these like warped images, and then I would like do things that would refract light. So I'd get like a bunch of like rainbow stuff. And I
oh,
kind of
neat.
came and then I would just in Photoshop was like, all right, like made a weird like thing. And I was failing the class, but the teacher was like, all right, I really like this idea. It's really fun. If you make me like 3 videos, I'll pass you. And I was like, deal. Like I was like, sounds great.
Ah,
You sold
he sees
me.
the creativity in you. You just
Yeah.
didn't, that class structure isn't for
Yeah.
everybody, especially
Make a
artists. Anyway.
problem, solve a problem.
Yeah, no, there you go. You definitely worked
Yeah.
it. And my last question is, if you could collaborate with any artist, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Oh man. If I could collaborate with them, whew, I mean, I'd have to pick, if I'm picking dead, I'd say Francis Bacon.
Mm,
He's always been my idol, like number one ride or die,
nice.
where like I think that's there's a lot of motifs that we kind of share.
Yep.
Um and so uh but I think living, there's a an artist right now, his name is Christian Rex Van Minnen. Uh,
Mm.
he
Oh,
does these really, really cool things where everything looks so, it's almost surrealistic. Uh,
mhm.
but he does like gummies and stuff, but they're all kind of like portraits or still lives, but everything's like super surrealistic. So like everything's like gummy or rock and like or is tattooed and bleeding or something, but
Yeah,
it has that like old Renaissance-y look to it with like
interesting.
weird textures, like
Yeah.
like
So that's a mashup for sure. I'll
hmm
put, for anybody listening, I'll put his link, to that artist in the description. So,
yeah, highly recommend
yeah. No,
him out.
very, very cool. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for
Of
your time
course.
today. I appreciate you. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Thanks so
it was
much.
a great conversation.
Yeah. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Feel free to nominate yourself or someone you know as our next guest. Thank you for being a part of our creative community. Stay inspired and keep shining bright.